All praise to the Most High. Let me lower this real quick. All right, there we go. So one of the points I want to make, and I think I made this point before, um, in a previous video, and that point is that the worst thing that you can ever do is try to debate Scripture with Scripture, right? I know a lot of people do that. Especially this one brother that I've been going back and forth with, which I just came to a complete halt. At this point, I'm just deleting his comments whenever he makes comments because I don't want him spreading his ignorance, right? But with that being said, a lot of times this is what people do. They try to take one part of Scripture to debate another part of Scripture, right? Instead of understanding that each Scripture is basically like stepping stones or building blocks, right? You don't take one Scripture, then say, well, what about this Scripture? Well, what about that Scripture? That's not what we're going to do here, because that's not how you handle or rightly divide the word of truth, right? For even the Most High said that it would be line upon line, precept upon precept, precept upon precept, that he would speak to the children of Israel, right? And so this is why we deal with the scriptures on that matter, because we're not going to use scripture to debate scripture. That's amateur, right? Where you try to prove one point to take away from another point by using a different scripture, and then try to twist the meaning of that scripture to support what you want to bring forth as your narrative or as your argument. That's something that we don't do. But what we do is we look at every single scripture and we see a progression. That's basically what you're seeing, from what some call the Old Testament to the New Testament, or from one covenant to a renewed covenant. You're looking at the things that were first implemented to the things that were renewed, right? This is why Mashiach said, don't think, don't have a mind, don't have an understanding of thinking that I came to do away with the law. But I didn't come to do away with the law nor the prophets, but rather to fulfill, right? And so with that being the case, just that statement alone, when we start looking at the different teachings of Mashiach, we start seeing him implementing or carrying out or fulfilling or being obedient to the laws that were given on Mount Sinai. Um, One of the greatest commandments, I believe, that a lot of people, um, they overlook, is in the Garden of Eden. And we have to understand where a lot of these ideologies and things come from, because in the book of Genesis, where we read where, Adam and his Ishaya, Eve, is in the garden, they were given a commandment, a law in the garden, not to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? And we know that here comes Shaitan, Belial, here comes the seducer, here comes the deceiver, right? The most cunning beast of the field, implementing a secondary thought, which was opposite of what was commanded by the Most High Yah to Adam and his Ishaya Eve, and from there came the fall of man. Anything that tries to get you to go against the commandments of Yah is the spirit of error. It is the spirit of Belial. It is of Shaitan, right? And this is my narrative. This is, if I ever had a narrative, if I ever had a so-called doctrine for any man to follow, my doctrine would be stay clear of the spirit of error. Stay clear of the spirit of Belial. Stay clear of Shaitan and his vices, right? Because this is what he seeks to do. He wants to rob people of their inheritance. He wants to take them out of their place of fellowship with the Most High Yah, okay? And we understand that because all throughout Scripture, that's what we see. Every temptation, and I'm going to end up doing a video on temptation because it's very key for us to understand this. Every temptation is a result of a commandment. And what do I mean by that? If there was never a commandment set in place, there wouldn't be a temptation. And the reason why is because temptation is only to get you to stay away from that which is true and that which is holy, so that you can do those things that are opposite of what's been commanded of you, right? And we see that in every temptation. Even when you look at when Mashiach is in the wilderness and he's being tempted, right? Everything he was tempted with was to basically go against the order of Yah, to go against the will of Yah, to go against what was been, what had been commanded. So temptation is a result of commandments or laws given to us. All of Israel had been tempted in the area of idolatry, in the area of fornication, in the area of covetousness and adultery and all these different things. Why? Because there was a commandment set against it. You can only be tempted away from something if there's been a rule set in place against it. If there was no rule against it, how could you be tempted? Right? And so this is why even in scripture sometimes Shaitan he's referenced to as the tempter, right? The one who comes to tempt you. Now we know that the Most High Yah, he tempts no man with evil, and he cannot be tempted by evil. So what the Most High does, he tests us to prove us, right? He gives us commandments to see. Okay, now let's see what you want to do. I've given you this commandment, and he allows there to be a moment of temptation. But this is his proven process, right? We saw it even in the book of Deuteronomy where the Most High said, he was like, I tested to prove, to see what was in your hearts, to see whether you would keep my commandments or not. Okay, and this is the premise on which my content is built upon, and I use the foundation of the law and the foundation of the keeping of the commandments because we understand that that's the only way you can transgress is if you don't keep the law, statutes, and commandments of the Most High. Where there's no law, there's no sin. And so, if a people want to be sinless, the only way that can happen is if they actually adhere to the keeping of the law. It's not going to come by you trying to do your good and your best works that you think is good. It's going to come by the precept order by which the Most High had given. I find it interesting because even in Christianity, people want to talk about, I speak this decree, I decreed it, and I declare. But that's what a precept is. It's a decree. It's a declaration that has gone forth out of the mouth of the Most High Yah. And you can't decree something that hasn't already been decreed, because nowhere in the Shamayams, nowhere in the heavens is it being acknowledged, right? You have to, it says, let each man speak as the oracle of Yah, right? To speak as the oracles of Yah. So with that being the case, there's no way in the world you could decree something and expect it to be established unless it has been a decree that has already been sanctioned in the heavens, and that's how we live our life. We live by the decrees. For man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word, every dabarayam that what proceedeth out of the mouth of Yah. And so, when people try to attack me on that, make it seem as though I'm, whatever. My only thing is to see the people of Yah walk in his truth and be not robbed of their inheritance. And you keeping the law and commandments of the Most High is not going to rob you of your inheritance. In fact, it's going to help you secure it. For the scripture tells us that we ought to what? Walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise men. What? Redeeming the time, finding out what the will of the Almighty is, redeeming the time. That's what we're supposed to do. Why? Because the days are evil, right? And so as iniquity increases, we should not be increasing in iniquity. We should be decreasing in iniquity, while those who are wicked and lawless, they increase in their iniquity, right? For all iniquity is sin. And we know that sin is transgression of the law of Yah. And so this is the true narrative that I speak. It's the same doctrine that the apostles taught. It's the same doctrine of the Mashiach. It's the same doctrine that's been handed down from generation to generation. Shalom.